It's no big news that the majority of projects we're getting in theaters are unoriginal. There are sequels, prequels, reboots, adaptations, and so on and so forth. And while none of it is necessarily a bad thing and we've all gotten used to it by now, there's one particular branch of this giant tree that has completely gotten out of control. And this branch is live-action remakes.
So today we're talking about how live-action remakes took over Hollywood and what eventually led them to an unexpected, actually a very expected decline. So let's get started.
To start things off, let's talk about a certain theme that's been going on for a while regarding remakes being a relatively new, harmful trend that either kills original projects or just makes it extremely hard for them to thrive on the movie market.
But this should be more applied to sequels rather than remakes, because the strategy of remaking movies has been around for as long as filmmaking itself, and it hasn't posed a threat to regular, original films. In fact, remakes were vitally important during the early days.
At first, movies were completely silent and used a so-called intertitle to show spoken dialogue or narration.
And as soon as people found a way to synchronize sound with picture, there was an immediate demand to recreate some of the most popular silent films in a brand new format where actors would now say their lines.
The same goes for when films transitioned from black and white to color, which was also a great opportunity to reimagine beloved stories with a drastically different look.
And this brings us to the remakes that we all know at this point, which are either old movies that were remade for today's standards, for today's audience, or foreign movies that were remade in Hollywood. The funny thing with those is that you could watch an entire movie without even realizing it was a remake.
Take Ocean's 11, that's a remake of a 1960 movie that had the same name. Or The Departed, directed by Martin Scorsese, which is a direct remake of a Hong Kong thriller called Infernal Affairs, copied almost scene for scene in some parts. A Scarface movie of 1932 was remade into the iconic Scarface movie in 1983.
Well, these three came out a very long time ago, so how about something relatively fresh?
For this we have Ambulance, a disposable action flick by Michael Bay released in 2022, which is a remake of the 2005 Danish film, which is also called Ambulance.
So no matter the time period that you choose, there would always be plenty of remakes, but the time when they really exploded was when they became live-action adaptations.
If someone asked me before making this video what was the first ever successful live-action remake, I would have certainly thought about something that came out in 2015 or 2016 when the remakes about Disney princesses started popping up.
However, the first major success actually happened way earlier than that, in 1996, and it also belongs to Disney.
That year, the studio released a live-action adaptation of the 101 Dalmatians animated movie, which came out in 1961. And despite having mostly negative reviews, this was a hit. The film earned $320 million worldwide, which would approximately be $640 million in today's value, and spawned a sequel a few years later.
But Disney wasn't ready to dive deep into live-action adaptations immediately because of a few reasons. One of them being the sequel I've just mentioned, which flopped pretty terribly.
In addition to that, a few years prior 101 Dalmatians, Disney released The Jungle Book, which was an adaptation of an animated movie of the same name, and it was a flop as well, so there was no consistent success with these kinds of projects at the time. Secondly, in the late 90s and early 2000s, Disney was mainly focused on releasing animated sequels to its major hits like The Lion King or Aladdin, and prioritizing family comedies, both remakes and original ones. And finally, Disney's acquisition of Pixar in 2006 made them focus on creating their own strong original animated films and getting out of the creative disaster their animation studio was having before Pixar came to rescue. So it was only in late 2007 when Disney decided to greenlight the production of Alice in Wonderland live-action movie, and it was a massive gamble. The original animated movie of 1951 was never one of Disney's beloved classics and was a box office disappointment. The new movie heavily relied on experimental CGI and green screen, which was still developing at the time and was very expensive, so the budget obviously went through the roof, hitting the $200 million mark thanks to this.
Spending $200 million on a project that's not a guaranteed success is insane even by today's standards. But in 2007, considering 200 million is approximately 300 or 340 million in 2025, Mickey Mouse would have legit hanged everyone involved in the project if it was a flop.
But it was a total home run. Alice in Wonderland was the second highest grossing movie worldwide, coming right after the first Avatar, earning more than $1 billion. That's billion with a B. But Disney studio heads weren't completely relieved. They were thinking,
okay, $1 billion is totally wild. We are beyond happy, but is it a one-time only success? Cause you make one live action and it explodes, and you make another one and it totally bombs. How can we be sure things are different now? I say we make one more of these, cut the budget slightly, throw it out there and see what happens.
And they greenlit Maleficent, which later earned $758 million with a budget of $180 million.
This was the exact moment when Disney discovered the cheat code for an endless money supply. Aside from an endless money supply that's already coming from Marvel Studios and the one that would come from Lucasfilm later, but it is a totally different story for another day. And it would be a totally great story for me if you press that like button and subscribe to the channel to watch more videos like this one. So I'm gonna be moving forward with my story while you take your time and decide what you want to do. However, I will still remind you of doing that at the end of the video though, so yeah, you keep that in mind.
So starting from 2015, Disney has been on a spree of remaking pretty much every old project they once had success with.
And people, including myself, were pretty much on board with it.
When I saw the first trailer for the Cinderella remake, I was excited because I liked the 1950 cartoon and was eager to see how it would be reimagined with real actors and the CGI that was already developed enough to properly bring all the magic to life. And the same can be said about the majority of adaptations that came afterwards. People were genuinely happy to see their beloved characters coming back to the big screen so they could dive into these stories once again and introduce them to their children who haven't watched the cartoons.
It was a big win for the audience and obviously for Disney, because they realized they don't have to constantly come up with new ideas anymore and can easily remake their old stuff for at least a decade with a massive return of investment. But this beautiful fairy tale had to come to its end.
It was pretty damn obvious that going full throttle with live-action remakes by releasing one project annually, or even 4 projects in just 1 year, might cause some sort of audience burnout.
But oversaturation wasn't the only reason why everything went down in flames. With each new project, Disney was failing to fulfill the only purpose these movies are made for. And this purpose is to cast a spell of nostalgia on people and lure them in theaters to pay for the same stories they loved watching as kids a very long time ago.
And it was pretty hard for these people to feel nostalgic when you replaced their beloved characters with some nonsense in order to please the Chinese market, which can be insanely profitable, I get it, but each time you tried it ended up being a total disaster. Or maybe when you'd hire anyone except a white actress to play the leading role in your movie called Snow White. I'll point it out one more time. The character was given this name because of her skin that is white like snow.
Oof, it would be a real bummer if I got reported for that, but at the same time, I'm only a small creator with 200 subs and a few thousand views, so the person who could get potentially offended by that will not see this video, so yeah. But if you want to increase the odds, you can do it by simply liking this video so it gets shown to more people. The choice is all yours.
Talking about Rachel Zegler for the last time on this channel, I hope, it was genuinely funny to read those tweets saying that her immense contribution to making Snow White one of the biggest disasters in Disney history was actually aimed at covertly eliminating this live-action remake everything trend that was put in motion more than a decade ago. Because according to reports, Disney has put the early production of the Tangled adaptation on hold because now they need to rethink the very concept of how these projects should be made.
But as much as I hate to say it, this trend is far from over.
So we're 5 months into 2025 and we've already got 2 live actions, with one being Snow White and the other the just released Lilo and Stitch.
And while Snow White was a movie that no one wanted to watch, it seems like Lilo and Stitch is a complete opposite.
According to several articles, the movie's pre-sale has broken all kinds of records and its theatrical run is expected to earn $1 billion at the box office for Disney, so clearly a much anticipated release.
But would people keep rewatching it after the release, or would they rather stick to the original cartoon that came out in 2002? That's a very big question.
So the next one is the remake of How to Train Your Dragon, coming out in just a few weeks, and the situation here is totally crazy. I guess this is the first live-action remake in years that doesn't belong to Disney.
I just don't understand why this movie was even made. I mean, I get it, it's because now it's Universal that wants their slice of this extremely profitable cake, but aside from that, just why?
The original How to Train Your Dragon came out only 15 years ago, and it still looks great. There was absolutely no need to remake it this soon. You could have waited at least 10 years from now and released it then, and it would have made much more sense.
So if this one is a success as well, then congrats, we will now spend another 15 years of our lives watching the same stuff all over again, but this time it's going to be DreamWorks.
And if you thought it's unlikely to happen because the majority of DreamWorks' animated films have either animals or fantasy creatures as leading characters, trust me, if they see it's profitable for them, they would certainly make it happen. So we better prepare for a potential Shrek remake. And now I invite you to take a look at 2026, where we will get to see the live-action adaptation of Moana.
Now this is straight up absurd, which is even crazier than the case of How to Train Your Dragon, because this is going to be the shortest time span between an original project and its live-action counterpart, resulting in a gap of less than 10 years.
If we take a look at all of the remakes that Disney has made so far, we will see that they came out much later. The Lion King was remade 25 years later. Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast, pretty much the same, 27 and 26 years. The gap between the original Cinderella and the remake is 65 years. And when it comes to Disney's very first animated feature, Snow White, and the remake that should have been cancelled before seeing the light of day, that's a gap of 87 years. The reason why some of these remakes work so well, aside from being nostalgia bait, is because they offer drastically updated looks compared to the original project, whose animation was starting to look pretty dated.
So now I want you to take a good look at what I'm about to show you and ask yourself whether it is old to you.
Does Moana's animation already look like it needs a complete reimagining just a decade after its release? Something tells me your answer is no. And it gets even more insane, because there's also a sequel that came out in late 2024 and which obviously has an even more updated look.
I mean, I don't know about you, but in my opinion, going to see this movie in theaters and paying money for that would be beyond stupid. Like, the only people who would potentially go see this movie are either die-hard fans of The Rock or the ones who just love watching the recycled content made by Disney. Like, there are no others.
So, what is it out there that's worth seeing in theaters then? Thank goodness we still got Pixar. This is the studio that has a soul. Not referring to this Soul, which by the way is an absolute masterpiece, I'm referring to, well, you know what I'm referring to. Their newest movie called Elio should be pretty decent, if not better. It looks beautiful and vibrant, just like any other Pixar project, and guess what? It is 100% original. meaning it's not a sequel or a prequel or a reboot or in any other way based on an already existing property. This is what we should be waiting for instead of yet another rehash of something we've already watched.
So I suggest we support Pixar in keeping original projects alive, because if they turn their back on them and stick to sequels, then we're definitely screwed. Thanks for watching this video. I told you I'd remind you to drop a like and subscribe to the channel at the end of it, so now is your time to shine, and this is it for now. Until next time, see ya!